Well, you know something, dudes. When you step in to the podcast world, brother, there's certain forces, immovable forces, and unstoppable objects, or whatever it might be, brother. But tonight, did you take your vitamins? Did you say your prayers? Did you do the right thing? Or did you tell your fans to stick it? Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, in front of all these people in podcast land, both of you that will listen to this, I only have one question for you. And that is, what you gonna do when Convince Me episode 35 and probably Hulkamania run wild on you? Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Convince Me. I'm Andy Rutherford, joined as always by Mr. Casey Elrod, Mr. Brian Bennett. Gentlemen, I probably should have come up with something I was going to say before that cold open because I got lost in the middle of it. And then, much like Hulk Hogan did a lot of his career, I just made some stuff up and hope it made sense. How are you gentlemen doing this week?
That was a mediocre promo, Rod. You are very average on the mic, just like Hulk Hogan was.
I'm going to disagree and say that's probably a top 5 promo we've had on the show.
On this show, absolutely. But
yeah,
that's like being the nicest guy in prison. Anyway, welcome, guys, to another episode of Convince Me. This week is going to be fun. And it's going to be fun because of you guys. That's right. You guys voted this week. You guys picked the topic. And if I had to say, if I wanted one topic to win, it would have been this one because this is the topic that I put on the poll. So I'm glad that turned out. But before we get into that, it is time for the weekly shill. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, follow us on all of our socials. Probably our most active social, facebook.com/Convince Me Show. That's where you can catch the preview every Tuesday night. For the first little bit of the show before the full episode comes out Wednesday. It's probably our most active site, facebook.com/Convince Me Show. We're also on Twitter. And if you're on Twitter, when you go follow us at Convince Me Show, occasionally we're going to throw up poll topics and let you choose the topic. If you don't like the topic this week, you should have been on Twitter and voted for something else, because this was a poll topic show. People voted over on Twitter. Of course, we're on Instagram. Nothing really happening much over there outside of the normal. But hey, if you're going to follow us on the rest, you might as well follow us there. And then, of course, we are on YouTube, tinyurl.com/Convince Me Show. Every single Wednesday, every single episode comes out in its entirety in video format. tinyurl.com/Convince Me Show.
Why is YouTube tiny? Hold on. Why is YouTube tinyurl.com?
First of all, we're 35 episodes in, and you just now asked that question.
I just registered, but wait a minute. Why is it just youtube.com?
Because youtube.com, the name that YouTube assigned us was like youtube.com/AZ4787265 blah blah. And I figured a tiny URL with Convince Me Show was a lot easier to remember and flowed with the rest of our tags.
Makes sense. It only took me 40 episodes to figure that out.
Brand continuity, and obviously, you've been accused of not paying attention on this show. 35 episodes in, you finally asked that question.
It's a legitimate question.
It's a legitimate question 33 episodes ago.
All right.
But anyway, this week, ladies and gentlemen, we are discussing the man who is, in my opinion, the most important figure outside of maybe one And really, that one wouldn't have been where he was without this one. I will argue that since the late 70s, at least early 80s, there's been nobody more important in the world of professional wrestling. There has been no bigger star in the world of professional wrestling. And I know people will argue with that, but it's the truth. There's been no bigger star than the man we're discussing tonight. We're discussing one Terry Bollea, as his name was given, but we're discussing Hulk Hogan. And for once, me and Bennett are doing the debating, and we're both arguing for the same person, but at two different points of his career in wrestling. He is one of the few people to not only be a really good, what in wrestling terminology, babyface or good guy, he was also a really good heel or bad guy. And to be honest, there's an argument to be made for both, that he was the best babyface of all time and the best heel of all time. But when we really look at him, which one was he better at? And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And Elrod, you're our mediator. Tell us what your thoughts are going in.
Well, I'll come at it from this point. When I first started watching professional wrestling, late 90s, I was late to the party, but it was all about Hogan in the NWO. He was the bad guy at this point, and he was really cool. So I don't really know Hulk Hogan as the good guy. So I'm interested to see this from Bennett's point of view tonight. The good guy Hulk Hogan, because I'm just really used to the bad guy Hulk Hogan.
Think of Hogan as like Chucky. He was a good guy, and then he turned bad. That's all you need to know.
Nice.
I want to play.
All right.
Also, I just want to throw it out there before we even get started. If some uber Hulk Hogan fans come across this show, we're trying to limit ourselves. We're only discussing a couple things. We aren't even scraping the surface. If we wanted to get, I'll be honest, this could be a 5 or 6 part show. We're discussing maybe 0.75% of his career over this next hour. Mr. Bennett talked about it earlier. There's so much meat on the Hogan bone. We're not going to talk about some of the most famous things in his life because we don't have time. But I just wanted to throw that out there for anybody. Well, you didn't talk about that time. No, but we might come back around.
We thought about it. We just didn't talk about it.
No.
I'm also enforcing the very strict 2-minute time limit on each topic tonight. So that will be in play tonight, and I will
have to cut me off. You're gonna have to cut
you off. I got the buzzer. All right. So I guess you want to know who goes first, right? So get your pen and paper out, both of you. Got a trivia question that's Hulk Hogan related, and it's Hulk Hogan in the entertainment world. One of my favorite.
Better not be Hogan Knows Best.
It's got to do with Hogan Knows Best. Closest, I don't care if you go over or not, closest to this. How many total episodes did Hogan Knows Best have? I'm not talking about Brooke Hogan's spinoff. I'm talking about the show Hogan Knows Best. How many total episodes did it have in its 4-year run?
Oh.
4-year run. How many episodes did Hogan Knows Best have during its run? Ready? Let's see the answers. 42.
Where's my answer? There it is.
53. Bennett was almost right on the money. Hogan Knows Best during its 4-year run from 05 to 07 had 43 episodes.
Wow.
Very impressive. Very impressive. Would you like to go first or second tonight, Sir Bennett?
Well, I guess since I'm face Hogan, and to put it in chronological order, I guess I will go first.
That was going
It
to
just
be
makes sense.
That was going to be my suggestion. So,
All right, Bennett.
See, me and Rudder are on the same page here.
You are. Tell
We
me
in good
why.
partnership.
Tell me why the good guy Hulk Hogan is the best between the two.
Okay, so professional wrestling, as we know it, has been around, correct me if I'm wrong, Rhett, for about 100 years, more or less. More or
A
less.
little more, but not a
A little
lot
more, at least 100, 120, something like that. Anywho, you've got the 40s and the 50s, which is known as the golden years. And then it kind of went through a little bit of a dip. Then it picked back up again in the 70s and 80s, which is kind of known as the second golden age. And the second golden age gave us people like Ric Flair, Andre the Giant, Macho Man Randy Savage. But there's one man that stands above the rest of these guys and is responsible for the worldwide success of professional wrestling. And that would be Mr. Hulk Hogan, what we're talking about tonight. It didn't matter if you watched wrestling or not. Everybody knew Hogan. He was instrumental in helping put WWF, WWE, whatever you want to call it, and professional wrestling in the spotlight. Hogan will always be the true face of wrestling. He pretty much set the standard for what a face and a wrestling organization should look like. You think without Hulkamania, what kind of version of Stone Cold or The Rock or John Cena do we get? Or do we even have these personas at all? You've got wrestlers that won more titles, have more belts than Hogan. You have those with better skills in the ring and better skills on the mic. But when it comes to charisma and being a real American hero and being a living, breathing definition of a wrestling hero icon, no one did it better than the Hulkster did, brother.
All right, Andy, tell me why it's the bad guy. Why is it the bad guy that's the better between the two?
You know, in a rare turn of events, I'm going to look at everything that Mr. Bennett just said and say that I agree with absolutely every single word he said. Hulk Hogan made there. Here's the thing. When we look at wrestling, we look at what we call boom periods. You know, Bennett talked about how in the like 30s and 40s it became big, and then it faded off. There's what we call boom periods, and then there's what we call the valleys, and wrestling works through cycles. There was a boom period round about mid 80s, 83, 84, that kind of rode the wave into the 90s, and Hulk Hogan was absolutely ahead of that. And then Hogan left to go do some more movies. Granted, some of them sucked. Mr. Nanny did some TV shows, Thunder in Paradise. But the wrestling industry kind of saw a downward swing. And then Hogan came back to WCW. He left Vince McMahon. He came to WCW, and he did a good guy role, but people didn't really care. And then Bash at the Beach 1996, the unthinkable happened, and I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. But Hulk Hogan turns heel, and you know what happened in July of 96 with that one moment? Another boom period started that rose through the end of the 90s. Hulk Hogan, but here's what makes it more impressive, this boom period. People identified Hulk Hogan. People loved Hulk Hogan. People knew Hulk Hogan as an icon. To be able to, at that point, turn into a bad guy when it's so established, not just among wrestling fans, but amongst pop culture fans, that, hey, this is the All-American, this is the great guy, this is we all love, the guy we all love, to be able to go from that and then turn people to where they hate you so much, they tune in to watch you get your butt kicked so much that it causes another boom period in wrestling. To me, both are impressive, but I think that's the most impressive. And therefore, that's why I would say that's the better one. And I will discuss that in a lot more detail, brothers. But if you're on Facebook, should have took your vitamins and you should have said your prayers, because Convince Me show runs, Convince Me Mania runs wild forever, but Um, the Facebook preview is for a few minutes, not for life. So guys, if you're checking it out, that was god awful.
It was
If you're
bad.
checking us out on Facebook, we really should like script things. If you're checking us out on Facebook, this is where we're going to cut this off right now. And we're going to move over into the full episode. Of course, if you are listening to this on the podcast, watching this on YouTube, you know the drill. We tell everybody on Facebook goodbye. Say goodbye, Facebook. And for the rest of you, we will be right back. And we are back. Mr. Elrod, where do we go from here?
Well, I'm going to start off with Bennett. I'm going to go back to the good guy Hulk Hogan. And Bennett, tell me about the rise of the Hulkster, the rise of Hulkamania. Tell me the origins and how that got started.
We're going to have to go back in time a little bit. We're going back to 1982. Vince McMahon purchases the company, which at the time was WWF, from his dad, and he's looking to expand it into a nationwide company or a brand, if you will. You have to keep in mind though, back in the day, there wasn't just like your one or two premier brands or promotions. There were several smaller promotions throughout the country. So Vince knows that he needs to find this person that looks the part, has the charisma, and has the skills to become the face of his newly purchased company that he has these huge plans for. And in a decision that would prove to be very successful for Mr. McMahon, he chooses Hulk Hogan. Fast forward a little bit to January 23rd, 1984. This is when Hogan wins his first WWF World Heavyweight Championship by pinning the Iron Sheik at Madison Square Garden.
Cheeky Boba.
Now, immediately after this win, commentator Gorilla Monsoon, great dude, he proclaimed Hulkamania is here, and that it was. He rose in popularity with his trademark yellow and red outfit, which, of course, he would often rip apart his tank top there when he got into the ring. Hulkster refers to his fans as Hulkamaniacs, and he would tell kids, say your prayers and eat your vitamins. In the ring, he would always find a way to come out on top, especially when it looked like he was about to lose. He would get that second win by hulking up. He would start pointing at his opponent. Then he would finish him off with this gnarly Hogan leg drop. So by the mid to late 80s, Hogan wasn't just the most popular wrestler to the audiences, to TV. He was one of the biggest icons in the U.S. Hogan was named the most requested celebrity in the 1980s for the Make-A-Wish Foundation children's charity with over 200 requests. He was featured on the covers of Sports Illustrated, which is the first wrestler to ever do so. He was on the cover of TV Guide, People magazine. He also appeared on The Tonight Show, and he had his own CBS Saturday morning cartoon titled Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling. Hogan, he was the premier WWF icon. He headlined 8 WrestleMania events. And also he ran this, some of you kids probably never heard of this, but he ran this 900 number that you could call in and you could listen to Hogan. And AT&T reported that this was the most called 900 number from 1991 to 1993. Once Hogan won the belt from the Iron Sheik, a new champion was born, and Hulkamania was here to stay as he remained the WWF heavyweight champion for an impressive 4 years.
Hulkamania runs wild, brother. All right. Take me, I guess you're going to take me closer to home when I know Hulk Hogan. Tell me about the origins of the heel Hulk Hogan. I think you're going to talk about a certain leg drop here.
As Mr. Bennett talked about, mid to late 80s, Hulkamania was running wild. He was the biggest star in the business, one of the biggest stars in the world. Eventually, that lands him opportunities outside of the WWF at the time, and he leaves to go do movies, TV shows. And ultimately, he gets a call from Eric Bischoff, who's running WCW, and he says, "Hey, why don't we talk? Ted Turner's got all this money. Ted Turner owns WCW." So, because of the name Ted Turner and the money that's associated with Ted Turner, Hulk Hogan took a meeting. Hulk Hogan comes into WCW, and it's this big coup that he's gone to WCW from the WWF. But Hogan was still doing TV shows. He was still doing movies. He didn't wrestle every week. He wrestled like 4 shows a year and a few shows leading into those pay-per-views to sell tickets. And people, it was cool when he first got there, but fans kind of started to, we don't care about Hulk Hogan because he's never here. Well, lo and behold, around May of 1996, I'm going to try to keep this short. A couple gentlemen show up on Nitro to take over. A couple gentlemen that people recognize from another program, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash. And it end up leading to this match at Bash at the Beach in July, where they're going to bring in a third partner. And then, so WCW has its guys. It's the big names. It's Sting. It's Lex Luger. It's Macho Man. Who's going to be this third guy? Match starts, and the Outsiders don't have their third guy. Oh, my God, 2 minutes. The match starts, and the Outsiders don't have their third guy. And then there's chaos in the ring. Everything breaks down. Out comes Hulk Hogan. Crowds go, Hogan's here to save the day. Hogan's here to save WCW. And then Hulk Hogan drops the leg drop heard around the world on Macho Man Randy Savage. In this one move, I'm going overtime. You can suck it. This one move changed the course of professional wrestling. You could watch the crowd and see those, what they call smart fans that know what's going on, losing their minds because this is something that's not supposed to happen. And fans start literally to throw trash in the ring for all those kids whose feelings are hurt. And Mean Gene, the famed Mean Gene, comes in the ring to talk to Hogan, and he says, "What are you thinking?" And I'm going to read Hogan's interview here. He starts it off by saying, "Mean Gene, first thing you need to do is tell these people to shut up if you want to hear what I got to say." Which, again, this is the say your prayers, eat your vitamins guy telling them to shut up. And then he goes on to talk about billionaire Ted offering him all this money and he's bored. And then he says this. But the crazy thing about that is, as far as I'm concerned, all the crap in this ring represents the fans out there. For 2 years, brother, for 2 years, I held myself high. I did everything for the charities. I did everything for the kids. And the reception I got when I came out here, you fans can stick it, brother. Because if it wasn't for Hulk Hogan, you people wouldn't be here. If it wasn't for Hulk Hogan, Eric Bischoff would still be selling meat from a truck in Minneapolis. And if it wasn't for Hulk Hogan, all these Johnny-come-latelys that you see out here wrestling wouldn't be here. I was selling out the world, brother, while they were bumming gas to put in their cars to get to school. So the way it is now, brother, with Hulk Hogan and the New World Order of Wrestling, me and the new blood by my side, what you gonna do when the New World Order runs wild on you? And when you look at it, everything he just said, what makes a great heel, was true. If it wasn't for Hulk Hogan, those people wouldn't be there. And to show what the NWO went on to be, which I'll cover later on, it was the leg drop heard around the world. It was me as an 8-year-old kid seeing something I never thought I would see and my heart breaking in front of my eyes. And it was in that moment where I realized, you know what? I can like bad guys in wrestling. Because I still love Hulk Hogan, even if he did just tell me to stick it. It changed the way people watched wrestling. I'll go really short on my next topic. I'm
But
sorry.
to say, you took. I feel like this is like Hulk Hogan taking over right here, telling Mean Gene to go suck it.
I think you know what Rut said though was exactly right. And everything that Hogan was saying to Mean Gene and to the fans was he had a point. You know, he really did.
That and he said
I don't
brother
think
about 16 times.
Brother.
I still don't think us being as young as we were. Well, for one thing, I can't believe the big, huge generational gap just between me and Rudd and Elrod, since
Yeah.
Elrod doesn't remember uh, face Hogan. And number two, Rudd, you said you're 8. I was probably 9. And at that time, I thought, okay, sure, he's with NWO now, but okay, we'll see how this thing goes. It's probably nothing. Little did we know at that time what was actually going down, really, not to the magnitude of what was happening.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, we're going to segue into something else. Both Hill Hogan and Face Hogan have very distinct theme songs associated with them. So, Bennett, I'll start with you. Tell me about the good guy Hulk Hogan's theme song.
All right. It looks like all three of us are sitting down, which is a good thing because we have something to discuss here real quick that me and Rudd already talked about a little bit. Hulk Hogan was not the first WWF wrestler to use Real American as an entrance theme song. As a matter of fact, it wasn't even intended to be Hulk Hogan's at all. It was first used by Mike Rotundo and Barry Windham, tag team. They used the Real American entrance song, but they left for NWA, and Hogan at the time was using Eye of the Tiger, but Vince thought that the Real American actually fitted Hulk's persona better, so he started coming out to that. Blew my mind. But on the topic of Real America, I can't think of a more perfect song for Hogan. His character really embodied the lyrics. Fight for your rights of every man. He would often square up against these anti-American characters like the Iron Sheik and Sergeant Slaughter and Ludwig Borga, all these dudes. And of course, Hogan was like this uber American personality and made this evident by the USA flags. You'd see the flags in the stands, and especially he'd enter the ring sometimes with the flag, and sometimes he was like overly patriotic, if that's even a thing. If you think about it, even to this day, 3 some odd decades later, he still comes out. People understand and recognize that Real American theme song, and fans will still pop when they hear that guitar riff. Anywho, in 2012. Bleacher Report released their top 10 WWE entrance songs of all time. Not surprisingly, Hogan's Real American took the #1 spot, stating, whether you love him or you hate him, there was simply no one who could electrify a crowd like Hulk Hogan, and there's no classic song better than his original.
All right. Right. Tell me about Hill Hulk Hogan's theme song.
Well, I will say this, it just kind of as a side note to neither mine or Bennett's point, but really underrated theme song is Hulk Hogan's WCW theme song when he first came in as a good guy, because he couldn't use Real American. WWE had the rights to it, so they had a song called American Made that didn't suck. It doesn't near get the love that Real American does because, obviously, but it doesn't suck. But Hogan joins the NWO, and here's the thing: for those of you that don't keep up with wrestling, don't watch a lot of wrestling, a lot, especially the big national companies. Now, see, when wrestling first started, entrance music wasn't a thing until the 80s. It just wasn't. Guys just walked to the ring. But a lot of times when things first started, they used songs that you would hear on the radio. And then national TV was a thing, and licensing laws were a thing. So they didn't do that anymore. WWE had a guy named Jim Johnston who worked there for years. Pretty much all the classic WWE theme songs you know and love were written and played by Jim Johnston. WCW had guys that wrote the songs, or they used old Turner songs that Turner had the rights to. That's just the way wrestling was, unless you're Hulk Hogan. For Hulk Hogan, WCW went out and licensed Voodoo Child by Jimi Hendrix. Hulk Hogan came out to Voodoo Child by Jimi Hendrix. The NWO had an awesome song. Hogan didn't even come out to NWO song. He had his own song with another very recognizable guitar riff. Anyway, really awesome. Only Hulk Hogan could get a licensed song. But for probably only the second time I've ever done this on the show, if we're grading this by topics, I concede this point.
Wow.
When we talk about wrestling theme songs, Real American is the only way to go. Real American and Sexy Boy. Outside of those two,
I had forgotten that was.
And Val Venus. Hello, ladies.
You know what an underrated entrance song is in the WWE? A lot of people
know me.
Evolution.
You think you know me. You think you know me. You think you know me.
Evolution.
Yeah, but that's not fair. Triple H used his buddy Lemmy there, and Lemmy's
he had a little bit of help. That's a great song.
It's basically
Motorhead's great.
I don't know. I kind of lean New Age Outlaws because you got to cuss when they came out. That's a big deal when you're like 11.
Fair point. It's a fair point.
Bennett,
I want
to keep this with you, Bennett. Tell me about some iconic moments and victories for the babyface good guy, Hulk Hogan.
Well, the first one we already covered a little bit. January 23rd, 1984. This was his first title win when he defeated Iron Sheik. And this was kind of the birth of Hulkamania, if you will. It began his title reign in the WWF. Flash forward a little bit. April 2nd, 1989. Hogan versus Macho Man Randy Savage. They had joined together and became the Mega Powers, which was a huge deal at the time. They were like an unstoppable duo. Just think of the two biggest, greatest, unstoppable forces joining together. But building off of some real life animosity and after their eventual falling out, Hogan defeats Savage in WrestleMania 5, which kind of begins his second stint as the champion in the at the time WWF. 1990 and 1991, he was the back-to-back Royal Rumble champion. He was the first person to accomplish 2 Royal Rumble victories, especially back-to-back. There, it's a pretty big deal. 1994. At this time, he's in WCW at Bash at the Beach. This is his debut in the WCW. He defeats Ric Flair and goes on to have the longest reign ever for a world heavyweight champion in WCW. And I saved this last one here, the best one for last here. WrestleMania 3, 1987. All right, you got to picture this. In front of over 93,000 fans, you've got Hogan and Andre the Giant. At this point, Hogan has been undefeated for a solid 3 years, and Andre was reportedly undefeated for 15 years. I don't know how much of that's true or not. We'll have to fact check Rudd. Reportedly, he was undefeated, but anywho, Andre really, at this point, he really shouldn't have been in the ring. He was in really, really bad health. He had no business doing that match, and Hogan does a really good job working with Andre's limitations to get this match done and over with. They kind of went back and forth. Hogan would gain an edge and Andre would gain an edge. But after a hulking up by Hogan body slams this 500-pound Andre the Giant. And it's known as the body slam heard around the world. And then, of course, Hogan does his patent leg drop and defeats Andre the Giant and to retain the title. This was basically Andre the Giant passing the torch on to Hogan. It's still arguably the biggest WrestleMania moment in history, and it's one of the most lasting images of Hogan's career and really one of the most iconic moments. If you could freeze frame moments in wrestling history, this is definitely one of the most iconic.
All right. Right. Tell me about some iconic moments and victories for the bad guy, Hulk Hogan.
Just a little bit to piggyback off what Bennett said. I'm not saying anything here overt. I'm going to let everybody else read in between the lines. But my father was a big wrestling fan, and I was born nearly 9 months to the day after Hulk Hogan body slammed Andre. There were a lot of people happy about that moment, and celebrations took place. And that's all I'm going to say. But moving
I don't
into,
think I've ever heard that. How have I never heard this?
moving in, when we look at the heel Hulk Hogan, we look at the NWO Hulk Hogan. Of course, the NWO ran rampant over WCW for a while, but anybody that knows anything about wrestling is Hulk Hogan didn't have a lot of iconic victories as the heel Hulk Hogan because the bad guys aren't supposed to have the big iconic wins. That's not how it works. They get their heat. They make people pay to see them get beat, and then eventually they do get beat. So when you look at Hogan's more iconic matches, I'm going to talk about those more in later segments because there wasn't a lot of wins. I will say he turned on Savage, dropped the leg drop. The next month's pay-per-view is Hog Wild, 1996. He's going up against the Giant, who had defeated him for the title back in October when Hogan was a good guy. And it held that title all the way through August. Well, Hogan came out with a little bit of help from his buddies Hall and Nash. He won the title and then infamously pulled out the spray can and spray painted NWO in black paint over the WCW championship. This iconic, the big gold belt, as it's known in the wrestling world. He spray painted the letters NWO across it. He went on to hold that belt for quite a long time. He lost it for 4 days. The next year, he lost on Nitro in a random match to Lex Luger for the title, only to turn around and beat him at Road Wild 5 days later. So he won 2 titles at that pay-per-view at the Sturgis Rally back-to-back years. Of course, he won another world title as a heel, a bad guy in January, and another moment I will talk about later on known as the Finger Poke of Doom. Which a lot of people, and another thing, Hulk Hogan didn't have a lot of iconic stuff as a bad guy because he worked for WCW. Hence why there's a lot we're going to talk about in the low points that aren't necessarily attributable to just him. Although he did have creative control, he could have said no. He was still there, but I think probably just the way the NWO ran rampant, spray painted the title. They used to beat people up and spray paint people. They knew how to get heat and make people want to pay to see them get beat up.
You know, just to go back from what you said a few minutes ago, Rod, we need more pay-per-views in Sturgis, these random places, not these big 30,000 seat facilities. They can't even have anything right there. Let's have it in Sturgis again. These random places around the country, bars,
It wasn't really
taverns.
random. There were thousands of people there.
Yeah,
for the annual
but it's
rally.
not 30,000. It's not a 50,000 seat arena. It's just
No, it's a 50,000 bike arena.
All right, Bennett, you talked about this earlier about torch passing moments. So take me back to babyface Hogan. What was the torch passing moment for him in terms of a loss that he had?
Yeah, that would be WrestleMania 6, known as the Ultimate Challenge. It pitted champion versus champion, and it was Hogan, which of course had the heavyweight championship, and you had Ultimate Warrior, who was the Intercontinental Champion. This caused a divide amongst the fans, and this is considered probably the most important match for the company since the Hogan versus Andre the Giant WrestleMania 3. At this point, Hogan's like American Hero act was kind of starting to get a little stale with the audience. And like Brad talked about earlier too, he was on his way out, to do some films. So Vince really needed somebody to step in and kind of fill Hogan's shoes, if you will. And by this time, the Ultimate Warrior's popularity was at an all-time high. It actually rivaled that of Hogan's by this time. So Ultimate Warrior was picked as the next man up. Hogan didn't necessarily think that this was a good call. He didn't really think he was the right guy. And according to Hogan's book, he said Vince McMahon wanted the Ultimate Warrior to beat me for the belt. I didn't agree with him. I didn't think the guy could carry the load. Then again, maybe I didn't give Vince a choice in the matter. So in the days leading up to this match, Hogan and Warrior made sure everything was going to go without a hitch. They choreographed ahead of time so that the match would be a huge success. WWF, they played up on the fact that the crowd was kind of split dead even on Hogan at this time. Some loved him, some hated him. And they also really played up on the fact that the Ultimate Warrior was this big, huge physical specimen that could match Hogan strength-wise. And while the match itself will never go down as a technical masterpiece, it was still a success because the crowd absolutely ate it up. In the closing moments of the match, the Warrior went for the pin. Of course, Hogan kicks out like everybody expects. And then Hogan goes for his patented leg drop, but the Warrior moved out of the way and then hits him with the big splash to get the victory. Now, interesting enough about this, the ref was supposed to give the Ultimate Warrior the belt, but Hogan took it on himself to get up and hand him the belt personally, even in defeat. Hogan made sure that he made himself look good and still put himself in the limelight, even though it was the Ultimate Warrior's time to shine here. So with that, Ultimate Warrior is your new champion, and Hogan is off to Hollywood, which is a strange omen in its own right if you really kind of think about it.
Okay. Right. Take me closer to present day. Talk to me about when Hulk Hogan passed the torch as the bad guy to somebody.
Well, I'm going to talk about two instances here, and let me know when I'm about halfway because I want to give them equal time. Now, especially this first one, there might be a little self-serving in the torch passing. But for those of you that were part of that big wrestling boom in the mid-90s, you started to watch, there's a name that I can say, and you know exactly who it is. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Goldberg, the undefeated streak. This guy comes in and is running roughshod, and he amazingly was winning like 30 matches a week if you go by WCW's official numbers. He was 1-0, 2-0, 6-0, 12-0, 36-0, like in a week span. But eventually he got up to like 155-0
in like 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, what seems like 2 weeks' time. But as the story is told, and it's kind of told differently, but they were having this is the middle of the Monday Night Wars. They're trying to draw better ratings than Monday Night Raw, and Nitro is coming live from the Georgia Dome for a weekly TV show in the Georgia Dome, not an arena, a freaking stadium. Goldberg's the hottest thing in town, and Goldberg tells a story. They used to have a show on Thursday nights. He was watching on one Thursday night, and J.J. Dillon, who was the figurehead of the company, came out and said, this Monday night on Nitro, Hulk Hogan will be defending his title against Goldberg, and that was the first time Goldberg had heard about it. Now, rumor has it that Hogan saw this as a great opportunity to put this guy over, and then later on down the line, maybe be the first one to break the streak. But on the Georgia Dome, on free television, not on a pay-per-view, on Monday Nitro, champion versus champion, much like the Warrior scenario, and Goldberg defeats Hulk Hogan with an assist to Karl Malone, which we'll talk about a little more in a minute. But the second one I want to talk about is something I went back and watched today, and I wanted to. It happened in 2002 when WCW's over. The NWO infiltrates WWE, and the match is set up as the greatest match of all time. It's the dream match of all dream matches. It's Hulk Hogan against The Rock. This happens WrestleMania 18 in Toronto. This is the greatest crowd for a wrestling match in the history of wrestling. I went back and watched it today, can confirm. But the crazy thing is, Hulk Hogan was a god in Canada. Hulk Hogan's big match with Warrior was in Toronto, and now here we are these years later, WrestleMania 18 in Toronto, going up against The Rock. Hogan's the bad guy, Rock's the good guy, but not to the crowd in Toronto. Toronto cheered Hulk Hogan and booed The Rock out of the building when Rock was arguably at his biggest. And the pros they both are, they completely changed how the match was going. Hogan started working like he was that old red and yellow. He hulked up in the match. Rock started acting like a dastardly heel, even though he's one of the biggest baby faces in the world. And eventually The Rock goes over. The Rock wins the match, but there's the ultimate handshake at the end. Hogan raises his hand. Of course, the NWO comes out afterwards and turn on Hogan, and The Rock makes the save, and it's Rock and Hogan standing tall. But it seemed like he was really passing the torch to The Rock. But because of that reception he got, Hogan won the world title the next month. So I don't know if we can necessarily call that a torch passing moment, but it kind of was.
Was it better than CM Punk's entrance at Money in the Bank?
Yes. Yeah.
And couple of observations. Number one, back in the late '90s, WCW was good times. It was good times. Actually, I'm gonna make 3 points. Point number two, I remember playing youth football, and we'd have our practice. When a practice was over, you'd come in and take a knee, and the coach would go over everything, and at the very end of practice on Mondays, coach would always say, "All right, let's get out of here and go watch Goldberg." And number three, when you talked about WrestleMania 18, right, with Rock and Hogan, there at the very end when it's just The Rock and Hogan standing there, that shot of them two like facing off is another huge iconic moment in like a freeze frame in wrestling history. So you've got Hogan right there as a heel and as a face, as well, as with this iconic scene that's in every wrestling fan's memory.
And
so that's pretty unique.
Like I said, I went back and watched it today, and Jerry Lawler on commentary was like, you didn't get to see Mike Tyson go up against Muhammad Ali. You don't get to see Babe Ruth have a home run contest with Barry Bonds, but we're about to see Hulk Hogan versus The Rock, and it really had that ultimate dream match feel to it. It was fantastic.
Hulk Hogan. All right, Bennett. We talked about the high moments for both of these, for both Hulk Hogan and Hulk Hogan. But each of the babyface and the heel Hulk Hogan both had some low points. So tell me, what was some low points for the good guy Hulk Hogan?
Due to time constraints, I'm only going to cover a couple of these. So keep in mind, I'm leaving off a ton of stuff. So don't come at me after the show's over. I'm working off of time here. But point number one, in the early 90s, Hogan found himself in this huge steroid scandal where he was accused of purchasing steroids from the WWE or WWF, whatever you want to call it, medical officer. Hogan, who had indeed taken the steroids, decided to take a sabbatical in '92, and then he would return later on. However, during the trial against WWE, Hogan admitted to using the steroids to obtain his huge muscular build. And this, at the time, may have tarnished his image, but it saved Vince McMahon's behind. They was probably going to go to prison. But in today's time, we're so desensitized to steroids in sports entertainment, that had this information had came out, this year, it probably wouldn't have been as big of a deal as it was back in the early 90s. Another low point, it's kind of a running low point, is that he's infamously known just for flat out refusing to lose to certain wrestlers. While this concept isn't exactly unheard of with megastars that act like divas, Hogan really takes the cake on this. He takes it to a whole other level. There's people that he did not want to take the spotlight away from him. There's some talents that he refused to lose to were Jake the Snake Roberts, Mr. Perfect, Macho Man Randy Savage. I think Hogan was always, jealous and paranoid of everything Macho Man ever did. Ultimate Warrior, he refused to lose to him. But wait, we just talked about how he lost the Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania 6. Yes, he did do that, but for what it's worth, it's widely believed that the main reason Warrior was brought over to WCW for that very brief time was so that Hogan could avenge his WrestleMania 6 loss. And Hogan pretty much used Warrior as his punching bag during his short stint at WCW. Kind of like that scene in Forrest Gump where Forrest is outside waiting for Jenny, and this car pulls up, and there's this other guy in there. And Forrest just comes in and starts laying into him. That's what Hogan did to Warrior when he came over to WCW there. Some of the others that he refused to lose to was Randy Orton. You've got a 53-year-old Hulk Hogan that's defeating a Randy Orton in his prime. Yeah, right. Get out of here. Another big one, Shawn Michaels. They met up in SummerSlam in 06, and he refused to lose. This a match that we never really saw was Stone Cold versus the Hulk Hogan. Hogan made it clear that he would, if he would put Austin over, and he wouldn't put Austin over, and Austin kind of took exception to this, and so really neither one of these decided to back down. So we may never ever get that matchup because both of their egos are either I'm not losing to him and I'm not losing to him. And lastly, real quick too, Bret Hart. For some reason, he's always seemed to kind of swerve Bret the Hitman Hart for one reason or another. And it's always been believed that Hogan's always been in Vince's ear telling him that fans wouldn't want to see Bret Hart get the best of Hogan. And he saw Bret Hart as inferior, and this is as an inferior non-main event level talent that wasn't worth his time. Bret the Hitman Hart was an inferior talent, not worth his time. Get out of here. Guy had an ego on him.
He did. He still does. Rut, tell me about some low points for the bad guy, Hulk Hogan.
Just to piggyback off of Bennett a little bit more here, Hogan is infamous. He won't just come out and say, I'm not putting that guy over, but he's infamous for rubbing his Fu Manchu, and whether it be Vince McMahon or Eric Bischoff, looking at them, rubbing it and saying, that doesn't work for me, brother. That's kind of his infamous line. And that means I'm not doing that. If you go watch that match with Shawn Michaels and Hulk Hogan, they didn't like each other. Hogan refused to put him over, and because of that, Michaels didn't like him. And if you go look, Michaels makes the biggest mockery of Hogan. Like, Hogan will punch him and he flies across the ring like he's been hit by a truck. He oversells the whole thing to make it look absolutely ridiculous. It's in somewhat of a protest. And if you don't know what's going on, you're thinking, what in the world's going on? If you know what's going on, it's hilarious. That was supposed to be the first of 3 matches. That was the first of 1 after that. I don't think either one of them wanted to mess with each other again. But Anyway, to my points now. When we look at Hogan's low points in WCW, there are several. Some of that can be chalked up to it was WCW, which was known for they were hot. What they did when they were good, they were good. When they were bad, they were awful. And a lot of that goes into. I'll just get into them. Bennett's already touched on one, so I'm going to go out of order and get it out of the way. The Warrior match. Warrior came into WCW basically for one match. Was it for Hogan to get his win back? Probably. And Bishop and Warrior said, "You're going to pay me how much?" And he came in. One of, if not the worst matches in the history of professional wrestling was their rematch at Halloween Havoc 97. I watched it again today, and it's laughable. It's so bad. Warrior was awful, and Hogan's can have great matches if somebody else in the ring can have a great match. If he's in there with a dud is what you hope for. That match was awful. When we look at the biggest, most anticipated wrestling match in history, Starrcade 96, Hogan and Sting. This thing was built up for a year and a half. It is the best build up to a match in the history of wrestling. I remember could not wait for this match. I remember being on pins and needles waiting for this match to start. The world was watching that match, and it did not deliver. Sting hadn't been in a ring in a year and a half, and you could tell. And there was supposed to be a spot. Bret Hart had just come over from the WWE after the Montreal screw job. And Hogan, what was supposed to happen was Hogan was supposed to pin Sting. It was supposed to be a fast count because Nick Patrick, the heel referee, was the ref. He was supposed to count really quick, and Sting loses, and then Bret Hart comes in, beats up the referee, and restarts the match, and then Sting beats Hogan. That was the plan, except Nick Patrick didn't count fast. He counted normal. Hogan beat Sting with a normal rhythmed 3 count in the middle of the ring, and then Bret Hart comes in and restarts the match saying it was a fast count when it obviously wasn't. Nick Patrick has said Hulk Hogan told him not to count fast. So it looks like Hogan beat Sting clean in the middle of the ring.
Wow.
Is that true? Is that not? That's what Nick Patrick says. Hogan denies it. But either way, that whole ending sucked. The most built-up match in history, and the match didn't deliver. Then there's the finger poke of doom, where Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash on Raw or on Nitro for the title. Hogan pokes him. Nash falls over. Hogan pins him. NWO's reunited, and Nash loses the title to Hogan. Awful. And then there, of course, there's Hogan's last appearance, Bash at the Beach 2000, where there's a real life rift going on with him and Vince Russo. Jeff Jarrett just lays down in the ring, tells Hogan to pin him. Hogan does. Hogan wins the title. And Hogan says, if you want to know why this company's going down the crapper, it's because of BS like that. It's live on pay-per-view. Takes the belt, walks out. And this was all planned. What wasn't planned was Hogan leaves the building. Vince Russo comes back out and trashes Hulk Hogan, says that Hulk Hogan used his creative control and you will never see that piece of in a ring again, and then just creates a new world title, and Booker T beats Jeff Jarrett for it. That was Hogan's last appearance in WCW. It was a train wreck. Lawsuits were brought because of that. There were a lot of low points and train wrecks during the heel run.
Ouch. Well, that's unfortunate.
Telling you, WCW was good times.
Good times. Bennett, take us home and tell me, what is the legacy of the good guy Hulk Hogan, the face Hulk Hogan? What's his legacy going to be?
Yeah, so if you were to ask the average person who may not know a whole lot about wrestling or the history of WWF, WCW, whatever you want to call it. If you ask them, who do you think is the greatest wrestler of all time, or who do you think is the most well-known and well-loved wrestler of all time, you're going to hear Hulk Hogan. This isn't by accident. This man revolutionized wrestling. He had what it took to take wrestling from the several small promotions into the worldwide phenomenon. And, you know, before we had Cena Nation, we had Hulkamania. All these huge followings that we've seen over the years for people like The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, even more recently like John Cena. Hogan started all of that. He was a worldwide icon. He was literally everywhere, not just in the ring, but, you know, commercials, movies, the cartoons, TV, all sorts of merchandise. Hulk Hogan, everything, shirts, toys, toothbrushes, towels, you name it, everything. And he even had that 900 number we talked about where you could call in and talk to the Hulkster, let you know, talk to him. We thought it was real. He had the looks of a superhero, and he had the charisma and the ability to really, you know, just draw the interest of the fans. So you think too, how many fans did he bring along to WWF or WCW? Even if they weren't, you know, the Hulkamaniacs, they may have seen Hogan square off against heels like Jake the Snake or Ted DiBiase, or even one of my all-time favorites, Macho Man Randy Savage. And, you know, these people might have thought, yeah, you know, this Hogan guy's, you know, something else. You know, he's the face, you know, and he's got everything going for him. But I really like so-and-so better. And because of Hulk Hogan, now you have one new follower for the WWE, WWF brand. So love him or hate him, you have to admit that he set the mold for others to become more than just entertainers, but prove that they could be a worldwide brand. Hogan's legacy will be that he's the biggest face that WWE has ever seen and quite possibly ever will see, and that a lot of the success that wrestling has had over the years could quite possibly be owed to Hulk Hogan and his success with the Hulkamaniac.
All right. Thank you, Bennett. Right. What is the legacy of the bad guy Hulk Hogan, the heel?
When you say who's the best group ever in wrestling, who's the best faction in wrestling, you're going to get one of three answers, pretty much. You're going to get the Four Horsemen, who are the original. You're going to get D-Generation X, who was running roughshod on the other channel. And you're going to get Hulk Hogan. Or, I mean, you're going to get the NWO. What Hulk Hogan did was legitimize the NWO. Because here's the thing. Hall and Nash come in. Who's the third guy going to be? There was a lot of talk. It was Sting. There was talk. It was other people. Who made the biggest, who in the entire world would have been the biggest splash for that group? It was Hulk Hogan. And that's who it was. And it was because of this intrigue that brought people back to wrestling, that got people to start watching wrestling either for the first time or again. He legitimized that group because this group is a real deal. Look, Hulk Hogan's even in it. He legitimized the NWO. When the NWO fell apart was when Hogan was gone more often to do other TV deals, and they added 117 people to the NWO and watered it down. But that, when you talk about the NWO being fantastic, was really that first core group of guys that Hogan legitimized. And not only did he legitimize this group, WWE has been, they caused, Jim Crockett to sell to Ted Turner. They caused all these promotions around the country to slow down because these companies couldn't even compete in their own market against Hulk Hogan. WWE became a monopoly basically because of Hulk Hogan. And nobody in the history, and a lot of people have tried, can compete with WWE. Only one has ever been a true competitor, and that was WCW. And you want to know why WCW beat WWE for 83 straight weeks, and everybody thought WWE might actually go out of business?
Eric Bischoff.
was because WCW was legitimized by the biggest star in the history of wrestling, and that is Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan made WWE. Vince McMahon did too. With they needed each other, they had each other, they built the empire. But then Hogan jumped ship, and the biggest competition for the empire was competition only because of Hulk Hogan. He's the biggest star in the history of
Is
wrestling.
is Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan the same as Bill Belichick and Tom Brady?
Could
Can we
be.
make that assumption?
It's
They needed each other,
you
and
know
when
that
one of them left, it
that's a heck
fell
of
apart.
the heck of a comparison.
So Brady and the Bucks are basically the NWO and Eric Bischoff.
Only in Rhodesia.
In Nashville. That's right. That steakhouse. I don't have any questions for either of you fools, so we are going to closing arguments. Dun dun dun. Bennett, we'll start with you.
All right, Errol, I got 4 names for you. I think you might have heard of these guys: Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock. These 4 men are very, very well known for their masterful matches at WrestleMania. When wrestling's on the biggest stage, these guys always showed up and did their best and put on a heck of a show. But did you know, before these iconic figures even stepped into the ring, there was one man who absolutely ruled WrestleMania? Can you guess who it is? Hulk Hogan. Hogan headlined a record 8 WrestleManias, WrestleMania 1 through 3, and then 5 through 9. And he also ties with Triple H for the most title matches in WrestleMania history with 6. Consider this: ESPN put out a list of their top 20 biggest matches in WrestleMania history. 5 of the top 13 matches were Hogan's matches. 4 of those being his time as a face, and then of course you had Hogan versus The Rock in WrestleMania 18. 2 notable matches of that included were WrestleMania 6 versus the Ultimate Warrior. That took the number 3 spot. And WrestleMania 3 versus Andre the Giant. That was considered the greatest WrestleMania match of all time, according to ESPN. I know we could debate these all day. When it comes down to Hogan, he may not have been the most athletic. He may have been corny at times. He was selfish, and he was downright difficult to work with at times. But he's iconic. We still echo his catchphrases here in the year 2020. On this, in his persona, he was a good role model for kids. Say your prayers, eat your vitamins, never back down. He was the mega star that wrestling needed at that time in the 80s. And really, in a way, he transcended the sport of professional wrestling the same way that Babe Ruth transcended baseball, if you think about it. So, I'll leave you with this. Ask yourself this question: where would WWE or professional wrestling, for that matter, be had it not have been for the massive success for the early Hogan, the face Hogan? Is WWE still around today? Is professional wrestling still around? If so, how big is it today? Is it as big as it is? Is it less? Is it more? We don't know. Hogan, was he perfect? No. Is he still one of the all-time greats to ever step into the ring? Absolutely. And I would dare say that no one has ever been as influential or as important to professional wrestling than the Hulkster. So, Elrod, tonight, I want you to fight for what's right. I want you to be a real American hero and give that title belt to face Hogan, brother.
Ooh. Right, this is close. Your closing argument could decide this thing. I mean, it's that close. So, lay it on me.
All right, tonight I want you to stick it. Just like all these fans, brother. Listen, Hulk Hogan built professional wrestling for people that are my age. Hulk Hogan made professional wrestling a national thing. And then when it started to die, he brought it back. But I want to tell you just how special this heel run was. Hulk Hogan was the face of wrestling. When you look at wrestling, there are really two biggest sources amongst wrestling fans that really take the fans, the true fans, the smart fans into account. And those are the Wrestling Observer newsletter and Pro Wrestling Illustrated. Those are two major news sources of the industry. Hulk Hogan was so big as a good guy and made wrestling so much as a good guy. He was most popular wrestler of the year 4 times in that big Hulkamania rise. Uh, he was wrestler of the year 3 times. He was number one on the PWI 500 in 91. Of all the years of the PWI 500, he was number one. He in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, he won Best Babyface every year from 1982 to 1991. That's how big the good guy person was. That's how much he was loved across the world. It was ingrained in people. This is a guy we loved. Yet somehow he was, when you really look at it, the heel run lasted 3 years. Started in the middle of 96. It was over by about the middle of 99. In those 3 years in Pro Wrestling Illustrated, 2 of those 3 years, he was voted most hated wrestler after being best babyface for like 9 straight years. He was voted the most hated wrestler. And in 1997, as a heel, he won an award in the Wrestling Observer newsletter for the best box office draw as a heel. Elrod, if you want to tell me you like the babyface Hogan better, that's cool. Me too. If you want to tell me you like the heel Hogan better, that's great. That's what you grew up on. Here's the thing. They're both good. And when it really breaks down to who you pick to win tonight for the first time in this show's history, I don't care. I don't care if you pick me. I don't care if you pick Bennett. But here's the thing. Both are impressive. But I think because of how impressive he was as a babyface that Bennett is arguing is what makes the fact that he was so impressive as a heel that much more impressive. That you were the most popular guy in the world. In the world of professional wrestling, it did not get any bigger and any more love than Hulk Hogan. And he turned it around and became the best bad guy in the business after being the best good guy in the business. And then eventually went back to being a good guy when he went back to WWE because the fans in Toronto said, yeah, The Rock's cool, but screw that guy. We love Hulk Hogan. Because Hulk Hogan is the biggest star in the history of professional wrestling. You want to say The Rock, you want to say Stone Cold, both fantastic. Hulk Hogan's the biggest star in professional wrestling because he was a better baby face than anybody has ever been. And I'll say it, he's a better heel than anybody's ever been. He was the best at both. That's why I don't care which one you pick. But I do think because he was the best at both, the fact that he was the best at babyface first makes it more impressive that he was the best heel.
All right. Here's how I scored this bout. Promise you there'll be no screw jobs in this scoring system I've come up with. All right. Let me ask both of you a question. I assume that you would both agree with me that it was the greatest heel turn of all time in professional wrestling, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Would both of you agree with me that, and you kind of alluded to this, right? Is Hulk Hogan the best face of all time?
Yes.
Character in wrestling.
Up to this point, nobody's passed him.
Right. If it wasn't for Hulk Hogan and the stuff that he did before he became a heel, is professional wrestling as popular today as it would be without it?
Say that one more time.
Would professional wrestling be the same today if you didn't have Hulk Hogan as the face earlier in his
Without
career.
having him as the face, I don't know that the it would not be where it is today. No.
Here's how I look at this. I believe that Hulk Hogan is the best face of all time. I think both of you agree with that, and that's what I think too. I don't know if he's the best heel of all time. I don't know.
Who's better?
He might be, he might not be. But here's what I do know. You know the reason why he's the best heel of all time? Eric Bischoff. Eric Bischoff is the reason why he's the best heel of all time. And I'm in a weird conundrum here because if I go with heel Hulk Hogan, Rudd has to acknowledge Eric Bischoff had a hand in that. And I kind of want to go that way just because he has to. We've had this running joke about Eric Bischoff. I think Bischoff was great. I think Rudd doesn't put much credence in that. But here's the deal. I got to go with face on this. As much as I want to go with Bischoff and as much as I want to go with him being a heel, his work as a face, I mean, it's what brought the company up. Without that, there is no professional wrestling on television today. There's just not. And if you take away his work with the NWO, it might be on television. It might not. We don't know. But we do know one thing. If it wasn't for his work as a face, it would not be on television today. So Bennett gets the win. Face Hulk Hogan.
I'm good with it. I'll say this. Without Hulk Hogan, the babyface, we don't have wrestling the way we have it right now. Without Hulk Hogan, the heel, WWE, while it still may be in business and still may be doing all right, they will have not had any competition ever without Hulk Hogan. If Hulk Hogan doesn't go to WCW, Ted Turner sells WCW or just folds it in 96 or 97.
And thus it doesn't make, WWE a better brand.
Yeah.
Than it is.
Look, the best stuff WWE, some of the best stuff they ever did in the Attitude Era was because they had competition and they had to stop doing what they were doing and evolve. Without that competition, where would they be? And without Hulk Hogan, they don't have competition. And for those that may be watching or listening thinking, oh, he's just a big Hulk Hogan fan. I mean, I'm a Hulk Hogan fan. He's not my favorite wrestler. He's probably not even in my top 5. Now, when I was a kid, I mean, he was my first favorite wrestler. Sure. There are pictures of me with Hulk Hogan shirt on at a very young age. I mean, I'm a Shawn Michaels guy. I always was. For a long time, I was a Brian Pillman guy. But, I like Hulk Hogan. As a kid, I loved Hulk Hogan. As an adult, Hulk Hogan's pretty good. I like what he did, but you can't deny he's the biggest star in the history of wrestling, period. Stone Cold had a fantastic run. The Rock had a fantastic run, and The Rock surely done a lot more in Hollywood than Hogan ever did. But when you want to talk about the biggest stars, the biggest crossover in the history of wrestling, it's Hulk Hogan.
Do you think that the second biggest face is John Cena?
Personally, no. I think he's top 5. I think Austin's face run, although unconventional, I think Stone Cold's face run is probably number 2.
Jack Swagger.
No, not Jack Swagger.
He's in the top 200.
So
close race tonight. Close race.
It's a shame we never got that Hogan-Steve Austin matchup, but because that was the thing when they brought Hogan in, when they brought the NWO in for WrestleMania 18, it was who fights Hogan, Rock or Austin. They went Rock. I think that was a good call, personally.
Hogan wasn't going to lose to Austin. Austin wasn't going to lose to Hogan. He took exception to that. So I guess they just would have stood there.
They would have had a real match. Somebody was going to be tapping out.
You know what, though? It worked for Michael Jackson in the Super Bowl. He stood there for like 6 minutes, and the crowd went crazy. maybe this could have worked. Let's get Vince McMahon on the phone.
All right. Well, gentlemen, I enjoyed this show. This was another one voted on by you guys, so I hope you all enjoyed it. Do you guys got any parting words? Bennett, you got a victory lap speech?
Yeah, I'm glad that Hulk Hogan won.
Yeah, I was worried.
There was
No,
a big,
but seriously though, Rhett had some really good points, and it could have went either way. And about halfway through it, I really felt that this podcast, my argument was crashing down, and I felt a little bit hurt inside. But I thought that I would take a stand, and I felt that whenever I dropped that Forrest Gump reference, that I started to hulk up, and I started to fight for my right. You know, be a real American.
Another reason why he won.
These are getting really hard to do. These Forrest Gump references in.
all right,
35
guys.
episodes in.
Do what?
35 episodes in.
Crazy for what started as boredom. Still
It
kind of
was all a dream.
battle boredom for me. But anyway, all right, guys. We thank you all for tuning in. We hope you'll be back next week. Not 100% sure what next week's format's going to be like, but we kind of have a general idea. We've discussed it. Probably going to be Christmassy because it is Christmas week. We may be similar to what we did last week with movies, except it won't be movies this time. I haven't fully crashed out these details with these gentlemen, so I won't say too much so I don't look stupid. But anyway, we will be back next week with something that we're going to come up with. We won't put that on you guys again. I know you all can't handle the pressure to do it that well, but you did good this time, and we appreciated it. And if Bennett ain't going to say it, I will. This is one of my favorite episodes we've done, so good job.
It was one of my favorite episodes.
So,
Really.
thank you guys for tuning in. Come join us next week. Say your prayers, eat your vitamins, and stick it. Until next time, peace.